Welcome to The Planted Runner. I'm Coach Claire Bartholic, and this is the second in my series of what I'm calling the PR Training Lab. Last week, we met Justine, who is a 40-year-old marathoner, first-time marathoner, and I went through my process of creating a schedule for her. Today, we are going to be working with Peachy. Peachy is 56 years old and she is training for a half marathon. If you're new to the show, these bonus episodes are a way that I can show you behind the scenes, show you how I make training plans for runners of all ages, training for all different kinds of races with different experience and lifestyle. So there is a contest if you would like to enter to win a free training plan made by me, recorded live here on the show. All you have to do is enter at theplantedrunner.com/PR training lab. All right, let's get into Peachy's form. So Peachy is 56 and she found out about me on the last show that I hosted. And she has a half marathon coming up at the end of September. Now, Peachy is metric. I'm not exactly where in the world she is, but we are going to do some metric conversions here, and I will translate that into miles for all of my American and British folks out there. All right, so what race is she training for? The 2024 Milo National Marathon. I am not familiar with that one, but we will become familiar with it when I write the training plan. So how long has she been running regularly? Only since March. Okay, well, I'm recording this in May, so she's only been running for a few months. That is not the end of the world. There is still time to get ready for a half marathon. If you're a new runner in 6 months, I'd say it's a little ambitious, but it's definitely possible. She is, like I said, she is a metric runner. So we'll be doing this one in kilometers. The next thing I ask is if she has any injuries that affect training. And she mentions plantar fasciitis. Okay, this is a tough one. This really is a tough one. So on the bottom of your foot, you have tissue called the fascia tissue, and that can get irritated with a lot of repetitive movement like running. The telltale sign of plantar fasciitis is when you wake up in the morning and take that first step out of bed, you might feel a burning or shooting pain in the bottom of your foot, usually around the arches, but it can be a little different for everybody. This is something that takes a while to heal, and it can be affected by a lot of things going on. It could be affected by your shoes, just your anatomy, your strength. There's lots of things that could potentially aggravate it. So this is something we want to get under control because it is going to make running a lot more painful. All right, let's see what Peachy has been doing for training. What are your recent races in the past 6 to 12 months? So she raced in April and it was a 16K, the Hoka Trilogy Run Asia. All right, 16K, that's almost 10 miles. So let's go ahead and say that's 10 miles. She finished that in 2 hours, 19 minutes, and 17 seconds. So that will give us a sense of what she can do. We can base her paces off of this. So that breaks down to be about 8 minutes per kilometer, or about 12:55 per mile. So if that is race pace, that is as fast as she can run for that distance, that will give us a good sense of her fitness. Now let's get into what is her training schedule like now. So I ask, how many miles or kilometers do you run per week? Typically, not including race weeks or taper weeks, which can make a big difference. So she says 13 to 18 kilometers per week. So that's 8 to 11 miles per week. That is on the low side for sure for half marathon training. We really want to bump that up. You want to spend more time on your feet. This is long distance endurance training. So we've got to spend a long time working on our endurance. So right there, I would say that's something we want to improve on. Now, at the paces she is running, she's probably out there for quite a bit of time so she is getting lots of time on your feet. And honestly, time on your feet, the amount of time you are out there is probably more important than the number of miles or kilometers. But even so, I would say we'd want to bump that up a little bit more. What is the highest amount of weekly mileage you've ever run, and how long ago was that? She said 50 plus, and again, we're in kilometers, a year ago while training for 42K. So 42K is a marathon. And wait a second, a year ago, I thought she said she'd just been running regularly since March. So, what I'm going to guess here is that she took a little break. She was training for a marathon last year. She took a break over the winter, or if she's in the southern hemisphere, for the summer, and she is training again. So she has been consistently training this last bout since March. So that makes me feel a little bit better that we're not jumping in too much or adding too much volume right away. But we still want to make sure that the progression to the half marathon through her training is going to be gradual and appropriate. All right, which days of the week does she currently run? She runs 3 days a week: Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So 3 days a week is perfectly fine for half marathon training. I would say it's on the lower end. I really like to see most runners up to 4 days a week for anything 5K and above. But that is a general rule of thumb. That does not have to apply to everyone, especially if you have lifestyles that don't really support more running. Or if you like to cross train, if you do something else that's aerobic, whether that is biking or swimming or walking a lot, those things can replace one of your easy runs per week and can still help you build up a big aerobic system. What it doesn't replace is the specificity of running. So, running is great for your cardiovascular system, right? But it is also a high impact sport. There is a lot of pounding in running. That's a good thing and a bad thing, right? So it's a good thing because we are training our body, our bones, our muscles, our ligaments, our joints, all of these things to be able to handle the impact whenever we go out for a run. But there is a line there that if we cross, we're going to have too much impact. We're going to get injured or overtrained. So we want to kind of find that balance where we are still getting challenged. We are still being stimulated to grow and improve, but we're not doing so much that we need tons of recovery time, or of course, we get injured or sick. So I would say 3 days a week for half marathon training is on the low side, but possibly could be acceptable depending on what else she does. What day of the week does she prefer to do her long run? She is a Saturday long run runner. So, if you remember last week with Justine, I really like people running the day before their long run. Again, it doesn't have to be written in stone. You don't have to do this, but it's a great trick for making the long run more effective if you run the day before, because you're not going to be quite recovered. So it's like you're starting at mile 6 or 8 kilometers, whatever it is. You're not starting at 0 when you start that long run, but you are stimulating your metabolism twice. So first on the day before with your shorter run, then on the long run day. So even if you have a shorter long run, it is not in a bubble. It is not in isolation. You are slightly fatigued from whatever you did the day before. So you are running longer without actually running longer. It's a simulation of a longer long run. So I would change that. I would say if she's a Saturday runner, I would say do what you can to run on Friday, or at least do something to pre-fatigue your legs a little bit. How long is your average or most recent long run? Peachy wrote 10 to 12K. So 10 to 12K is 6 to 8 miles. But remember, up at the top, she said she is running 13 to 18K per week. So what that tells me is that she's a little unbalanced when it comes to her long run. She's running the vast majority of her time is the long run. And then there are 2 shorter runs during the week. Now, that can be great if she were running more days, but if she's running a 10K on the weekends and only 2 or 3K during the week, it's typically not quite enough stimulus to really get you ready for the half marathon distance. So I'd like to bump that up just a little bit if possible. What pace would you say is a very easy effort, relaxed pace for an average run? This is a pace that is so slow that you could talk almost the entire time as easily as walking. She put down 8:30 per kilometer. So 8:30 per kilometer for the Imperial folks is a 13:40 per mile. Now, at this pace, I would suggest let's talk about a run walk. Because if you're run walking, that means you're taking scheduled breaks to walk. What this does is allow you to run longer and potentially run faster, but still spend a lot of time out there, time on your feet. Walking is an amazing aerobic activity, so we don't want to diminish the power of walking. It's absolutely great. And in fact, it can help you run longer. Now, if Peachy is running at the 8:30 per kilometer pace, she is hopping from one foot to the other. She's not shuffling. She's not double supported. So double supported means you're touching both feet to the ground at the same time. Then that's perfectly fine to be running at that pace. That is still running. That is absolutely fine. But if she's looking to increase her pace, if she is looking to increase her distance, which she is, I would say the most effective way to do that is to add some walk breaks. So I would start off with maybe a 5-minute run, maybe with 1 or 2 minute walks, and maybe do that for a half an hour. And then start building on that. So you could build with time, you could build with frequency, or you could build with your running intervals. So maybe the following week, she bumps it up to 6 minutes with a 1 minute break. And then on the weekends, when she has her longer runs, I would definitely do these run walk. And that way we can really work on your speed without being so fatigued from such a long run. So that is my suggestion. I would say I would incorporate at least her long run to be run walk, just to make sure that we're really working on some speed and we are boosting the aerobic system in the most gentle way possible. What day does Peachy like her speed days? On Tuesdays or Thursdays. That's great. That gives her enough time spread out from her long run, not running those back to back. So we would probably do, if she's only running 3 days a week, we would want one of those long, one of those speed, and one of those easy. Now, like I said, I would love to see her running 4 days a week with 2 easy runs for a much better balance of the type of running that she's doing. But if that's her only option, just to run 3 days a week, that's the way I would do it. Saturday long run, Tuesday speed, and Thursday easy run. You could swap out the Tuesday, Thursday if that makes more sense. But again, with 3 days a week, we're really not giving ourselves a lot of options to mix up the style of running, to mix up the types of running. And you really do want to have a nice variety of runs. So, but again, this is what we're working with. So that is going to be okay. Which days of the week does Peachy take a full rest day. Now, a full rest day is no cross training, no running. You can be lightly active. You're not completely just lying on the couch all day. You are just not doing any scheduled exercise. She says Friday. Okay, so we know she's running 3 days a week. She's got one rest day a week. Let's find out what she does with the other 3 days a week. We'll find out in just a minute. What are your non-negotiables when it comes to your training day? She says she's flexible. That's great. But she's doing strength workouts Monday through Wednesday, leg, upper body, glute split, Saturday full body, Sunday hit. Okay, so it sounds like she is doing way more strength training than she is running. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but if your goal is running, you probably want to switch your focus and do more running. She doesn't necessarily have to do less strength training unless it is cutting into her time that she could spend running, or if she is too sore from her strength workouts to run well. Now, a Sunday hit session, if you do hit, which is high intensity interval training, if you do that once a week as a runner, that's probably great. High intensity intervals really do work on your entire metabolic system. They make you a more well-rounded athlete. Older runners, especially female older runners, could use a little dose of strength and power, and that's exactly what HIIT does. So it can be fantastic for runners. The only caveat is it is very demanding. So if she's doing just a little bit of that, that's perfect. If she's doing an hour-long session, that's probably going to make her pretty tired, wipe her out for the next couple of days. So want to make sure you are getting the right dose, and of course, you're getting the right recovery. Okay, so I asked which schedule would work best for you. Where should we put the long run? And she has switched it to Sunday. So she could run long on Sunday. She still wants her speed days on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and she's okay with running Saturdays. Okay, so would be great if she's flexible enough to switch her long run to Sunday and then run the day before. This would be a perfect 4-day running per week schedule. So that's great to see that she's willing to move things around. All right, what are Peachy's favorite running workouts? And she put strength. So I'm not sure if she meant strength training, lifting weights, or if she meant strength workouts. So an example of a strength workout would be something like hill repeats. Some people call strength workouts long tempo runs or broken tempo runs, where you really do need to have a lot of strength and leg durability. So I'm not sure exactly what she meant there, but I think based on the fact that she is lifting 4 or 5 days a week, she meant strength training. What are your least favorite kinds of running workouts, or what do you struggle with on your runs? Peachy wrote tempos and plyometrics. Okay, so a tempo run, people use the word tempo to describe a lot of things. The way that I like to describe it is the highest level of or the fastest pace that you can run for about 40 to 60 minutes. So that is a medium high pace for most people. So if you can run a 5K in 40 minutes, your 5K pace is your tempo pace. If you can run a 10K in 40 minutes, your 10K pace is your tempo pace. So I always hesitate to attach paces to races because it really just kind of muddies the water a little bit. So your tempo could be a range, from 5K to the half marathon for some of these elite runners who run a half marathon in 60 minutes. So it is a medium high effort. Okay. It is right where you are really starting to switch over into your anaerobic dominated systems. It is starting to get really, really difficult at the 40 to 60 mark, but you are doing just fine with it for about 20 minutes. Usually not going to give you a tempo run that lasts 60 minutes, because then it's technically not a tempo. That would be a race effort, a much higher effort. So that is something that she doesn't enjoy. And honestly, that's something that we've got to work on if you are looking to increase your stamina for a race like the half marathon. If you want to run it as fast as possible, some of this medium high effort work is something you're going to need to practice. Plyometrics, that is jumping work. Now, when a lot of people think of plyometrics, they think of these videos on YouTube where people are jumping these super high boxes and, doing these acrobatic feats. It really does not have to be that intense or that complicated. I've made a plyometric video for YouTube. You can check it out, follow along. No equipment, and it's really just hopping on one leg or hopping on two legs, doing a little back and forth. Plyometrics is super important for runners. It builds power, it builds strength. And when you're doing this on one leg, it really helps your balance. Because think about it. When you're running, you're hopping from one leg to another. You could call running a plyometric exercise. But when you really focus on single leg strength and you focus on power, you really can grow a lot as a runner. So I like to give plyometrics to my athletes either once a week or every other week. I would say once a week is probably all you need, especially if you run a lot. You really don't need to be jumping that much. But if you are training for something that is more strength based, let's say it's a trail race, something with high elevation, something that you really need power to push uphill, plyometrics are going to be your friend. But, if you're also doing HIIT workouts once a week, that might be a little excessive. What kind of non-running physical activities or cross training does Peachy do? She says she does swimming on Friday. So that is great. Swimming is a perfect complement to running because it is usually something you have to go a lot slower. It's non-impact, so that's great. So it's perfect for a recovery effort from running. So if you do it on a day, I would schedule it on a day after speed work. So if she's doing speed on Tuesday, I would say that Wednesday would be a perfect day to swim. She could do it the day after her long run. So she could do it on Monday. There's nothing wrong with doing it on Friday, but for some people, swimming actually does take a lot of effort. And so we don't want to be tired going into our long run or the day before the long run. So, take a look at that and think about what you're doing. You don't want to do hours in the pool or swim miles in the pool. It's great for aerobic activity, but you want to make sure it complements your running if running is the main goal. We already know that she strength trains. What is your biggest struggle with nutrition? She says, getting enough protein with a pescatarian diet. So, pescatarian means that she eats fish. I don't know what the rest of her diet looks like, but getting enough protein can be a challenge for any runner, depending on what diet you're on, except maybe the carnivore diet, then you're getting plenty of protein, right? So, what I recommend is to look at what you're doing and pay attention to what you're doing for at least a week or two. Take a look. If you use an app or you just write it down on a piece of paper, aim to get 20 to 25 grams of protein per meal. That is a ballpark number that works for a lot of people. Bigger people are going to need more, smaller people are going to need less, but you want to make sure you're getting somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Now, a lot of people have an issue with that. Well, is it your ideal body weight? Is it your current body weight? What if you're carrying extra fat? Should you use that number? Honestly, it doesn't have to be that complicated. Most women could aim for 100 grams of protein a day, and that would be a lot more than they're eating right now. Now, I know that sometimes protein is sort of a hot topic, especially in the plant-based world. There are plenty of very famous plant-based doctors that say you don't need to worry about protein. There's plenty of protein in plants, and that is true. There's plenty of protein in plants, but athletes really do need to think about it, especially if you're trying to grow muscle, if you are trying to avoid losing muscle, if you're trying to stay full without eating too many calories. So there's a lot of benefits to having more protein, and it can be a challenge. So I would say, first of all, really honestly take a look at what you're eating. Don't make any changes, just record it as data, see what you're doing, and then start looking for ways to incorporate a little more. So I say start with protein. What is your protein source for every meal? She eats fish. So if that is a part of your diet, fish is 100% protein and with a little fat. There's, meat does not have any carbohydrate. So most meat is going to be some ratio of fat and protein. And then, of course, lots of places to get protein from plants: tofu, soybeans, seitan, lentils. There's lots and lots of places that you can do it, but I would say start with that as your focus if you have been struggling, and see where you can incorporate a little bit more. What are your biggest struggles mentally when it comes to success and performance? Peachy says, I'm 56 and I'm afraid to get injured and not being able to run. I'm no longer fast as I used to be with the slowing down during the pandemic. Okay. I actually hear this a lot. People are afraid to get injured. So, obviously, that's usually from people who have been injured in the past. They have healed and they're afraid to get hurt. So, what I say to that is start slowly. We all have we all can get injured, even people who've never been injured before. It can happen. But if we are doing a nice balance of running, strength training, eating well, sleeping well, checking all the boxes, our injury risk is a lot less. But don't push it until you're confident with something. So if you are trying out new paces, if you're trying out new speed work, make sure you really are training at your current fitness. We all want to do better, but I think more people end up underperforming when they have this fear. They're afraid of getting injured. Well, the way to combat fear is to grow some confidence. So take baby steps and don't push it all at once. Sneak up on your fitness. And before you know it, you'll get fitter and fitter. Even if you're 56, you can still get fitter. Absolutely can. It just is, you have to focus on what your goals are. Where do you want to get fit? If you're spending most of your time strength training, there's nothing wrong with that, but you're not going to have the time to devote to becoming the best runner you're going to be. So decide where to spend your focus. Running 3 days a week is, like I said, probably not enough to be the best half marathoner that you could be. So maybe trade just a little bit of that strength training or cut it down. You can still do it as often as you are doing it currently, but instead of doing whatever it is you're doing, let's say you're doing an hour, let's say you're doing a half an hour, try just 10 minutes. Just shift the balance just a little bit. The fear of getting injured might never 100% go away, but you can make that voice a little quieter by building up your confidence. I'm no longer as fast as I used to be. Sure, we all will slow down with age at some point. At 56, I think you still have years to improve. I still think that with focused training, you could improve what you're doing. So, are you going to be as fast as you were when you were 30? Well, if you trained perfectly at 30, no. But if you weren't an athlete at 30, yeah, you actually probably could get to a much higher level of fitness. So, it's a little bit about perspective. And yeah, there will be a day when we're not as fast as we used to be, but that doesn't mean that we have to keep comparing ourselves to our old selves. There's lots to look forward to in the future, and there's lots of ways to measure success. What are you hoping to learn or gain in this training cycle? How to be faster, how to eat right to protect my muscles. So, yeah, you're strength training a lot. You're building muscle, but if you're not eating enough, and if you're specifically not eating enough protein, all that work in the gym isn't going to produce results. So, I highly recommend that you track for a little while, not forever. If you are not the type of person that can look at the data as simply data, if you are going to become obsessive with tracking, if any of those things, then no, it's not something that you should do all the time. But it can really give you a snapshot of reality and see where you can make some little changes. Anything else you'd like to share that would be helpful to your success? I would really like to be toned, be lighter, and be faster, and I'm not sure whether I have the right program for my weightlifting. Well, I mean, it depends on what the goals really are. So, is the goal performance in this half marathon, or is it body recomposition? Those are two separate goals. Yes, you can change the way you look, you can change your body through training for races, but they are opposing goals usually. Because for half marathon and up, we have to focus on fueling for performance. We have to fuel during some of our runs. We need to fuel any run that's longer than an hour. And for half marathon training and up, you should be running more than an hour at a time, at least on your later long runs. So, in order to do that, you have to be fueling. You should not be in a calorie deficit. So, the only way to lose fat is to be in a calorie deficit, and the only way to build muscle is to be in a calorie surplus. So it's really kind of, we have to prioritize what we are focusing on. You absolutely can build muscle when you are training for long distance races. That is completely possible, but you got to pay attention to what you're eating. Again, with protein, you've got to pay attention to that. So, yes, there are some challenges here if you have too many goals. So, if you were saying, "Hey, I am just running a half marathon because it seems like the thing to do, but my real goal is to change my body composition," then I would do something different than the half marathon. I really would. I would put you in 5K training. I would do more faster, shorter stuff. And then, perhaps change up the weight lifting. I don't know exactly what you're doing in the gym, but strength and power stuff is probably what we need. Power things that you can do with running, again, are hill repeats. You can be doing some kind of sprinting work, strides. Those are all sort of power moves that can really help your body composition. They can help you grow, build strength and power. So I would do something different depending on which goal you really have. But I'm assuming that the half marathon is the goal here. And so that would be our focus. So I would say a little more running and perhaps some shifting of the strength training. Okay, so that was Peachy's. Okay, so that was my process of how I would create a half marathon training plan for Peachy. And Okay, that was my process of creating a half marathon training plan for Peachy. Best of luck to you. And as a reminder, if you would like me to create a training plan for you, totally custom, recorded here on the Planted Runner podcast, all you have to do is fill out a form and write an Apple Podcast review, and I will pick somebody to do next week. If you have already submitted and you're hoping you will be picked, I have lots to choose from, so you are still in the running. But again, if you haven't submitted yet, go ahead and go to theplantedrunner.com/PR lab. That's it for me today. Have a great run today.